Good morning and welcome to this edition of San Diego People. I'm Ross Becker. We're just 3 weeks away now from the 2012 general election, and voters are going to be making critical decisions on our nation's future, from who will be our next president for the next 4 years to how we pay for education here in California and in San Diego. One of the decisions at the ballot box on November 6th will be a choice for one of our 2 United States senators from California. In that race, Elizabeth Emken is the Republican challenger to incumbent Dianne Feinstein. Ms. Emken is the former vice president for government relations at Autism Speaks. She is also specialized in corporate operations and financial analysis at IBM. In 2010, she made an unsuccessful bid for Congress, but now she is taking on what some consider a California political icon, Dianne Feinstein. Well, today we're going to find out what Elizabeth Emken says she can bring to Washington on behalf of California. She joins us now. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate you've been busy the last, 6-8 months going up and down our state. And my guess is your biggest job is just introducing yourself to many Californians.
Exactly. You know, I've actually been campaigning, which is something that Dianne Feinstein has been off for 42 days now and has really chosen not to campaign. She's the only sitting senator who is not debating. And so I've been going up and down, really talking all corners of California. You know, I went to Wairika, I've been out to Indio. These are locations, places in California that have no memory of Senator Feinstein ever coming in the last 20 years.
When you took this on to go to Washington, obviously you had a list in your mind of things that you wanted to see done. Take us through some of that list right now and what you'd like to accomplish.
Well, it really comes out of my 15 years experience working on legislative issues on behalf of families dealing with autism, and from my leadership in the government relations department at Autism Speaks. What I found was we have federal agencies that simply aren't responsive to taxpayers and to Congress. And I specifically am looking for more accountable federal agencies. And one of my bills that I worked on, the Combating Autism Act, laid the groundwork for what it takes to have authorizing language that requires your federal agencies to be more responsive. I'm looking for a federal government that is smaller, more efficient, and utilizes your taxpayer money well. I know that sounds almost you would think, of course, this is
in common sense.
In common sense, and it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen, and can one person really change that, though, in Washington?
I think so, and I think, again, I look to my 15 years working on these issues. I've successfully done 2 major pieces of legislation. In both cases, I was told that they would never be accomplished. One was the Children's Health Act of 2000. I was said, oh, you will never be able to get a bill like that done in the Clinton administration. And then the Combating Autism Act, which is only the second single disease health bill, other than the Ryan White AIDS Act at the time. I was so told, well, you'll never be able to accomplish that. So I'm used to taking on challenges that the really smart guys say can't be achieved. So I figured this race against Dianne Feinstein is right in my wheelhouse.
I was going to say, speaking of that, I mean, you are climbing very respectfully a very steep hill here. Dianne Feinstein has been in that seat for a long time. She has great name recognition in the state, and it's a state that usually goes Democratic.
Well, here's the thing. I think, in fact, that was true at one point or other. Right now, as of last Thursday, the 11th of October, Dianne Feinstein was polling under 50%, at around 48%. With 21% of Californians undecided in this race. I think it is true that Dianne Feinstein is well known, but she's not popular. There's a difference. If she had that same popularity, she'd be over 50%. So name recognition, that's true, but it's also working against her in this particular cycle, because Californians recognize we're at the bottom of every economic measure, California, at this point. We've been struggling. We are now California is the butt of late-night TV jokes. When your state is being ridiculed, people of California tend to notice it. Dianne Feinstein's part of the problem. She's part of the long-term incumbency we see, especially in the Senate.
Do we want to, though, as a state, trade that, I guess you would call it seniority, which Dianne Feinstein has? She has a lot of power in Washington. Do we want to trade that for someone like yourself who would be coming brand new through the door?
You absolutely do. Let me give you 2 reasons why. First of all, her seniority is on Senate intelligence. Let me give you an example of what you're getting. When she was out day after the assault on the Libyan consulate and said that it was a mob action. Okay, so perhaps she was one of many who was making that statement. But as of just a couple of days ago, several weeks now after this attack terrorist attack on the consulate. Her website still said that it was a mob action. Dianne Feinstein is retired in place. She is not doing anything from her seat on the Senate Intelligence Committee that is benefiting California in any way. I would challenge her if she would have a debate. I would say, what exactly have you done on behalf of California in the last 6 years? She's, in contrast to that, I'm going to go back. I have every intention of being on health, education, labor, and pensions, and working directly for California. Every day I'm back there. I have a history of problem solving. I have a history of taking complex legislative issues and turning them into sensible law.
Talk about that a little bit.
Right.
Explain to me how that works, because people at home are going, yes, we've heard this from politicians
Sure.
before, and you do have a business background,
Yes.
and you do have a nonprofit background as
Exactly.
well.
Well, and that's what I did. When my years at IBM, what I did for IBM was cost and financial management for IBM US, and really employed what are common sense business principles, or it's where I learned them, where you manage business units. You look for efficiencies, ways to be more productive.
Do you think government should be run more like a business?
I know it can. My second career, when my son was diagnosed with autism, and I went back to work on behalf of kids and families that were dealing with autism, showed me this. Again, the Combating Autism Act, in the formation of this bill, I wanted accountability mechanisms, as did our Senate sponsors. So what we did is we put in the requirement for a strategic plan. Then we had the agencies needed to show the results of the strategic plan in a report to Congress. And most importantly, we put in sunset provisions. We said that this funding is going to end. You need to show, justify what you've done, show that deliverables, to keep it going. There's no reason that we cannot put those sort of mechanisms in all authorizing language at the federal level. I believe the very act of holding our federal agencies more accountable through these mechanisms will, in and of itself, lead to a smaller, more efficient federal government that takes better use of your tax dollars, Ross.
Leaving Dianne Feinstein and what you think she's not doing out of it, when you travel around the state to places like Indio and here into San Diego, what are people telling you about what they want you to do when you go to Washington?
They want me to bring California back to a competitive business structure again.
So then we're back to this business
Absolutely.
model.
Here's what we know. We know that right now the United States has the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And California, you add on everything that we are doing with additional taxes, our regulatory environment, and regulations are hidden taxes. It's made for an environment where businesses cannot compete in California. Every single day, I talk with another individual who either their business or a business they worked for is leaving the state. When you have Governor Perry and Governor Sandoval come into our state once a month and entice companies to leave, Canada's doing it too. I've talked to a number of people who said they've been approached by Canadian officials to move their businesses to Canada. We are ripe for the taking, and when we are actively having businesses drawn out of our state, and we have no defenses right now. So at the federal level, I can and will be part of federal tax reform. I fully expect the U.S. Senate to take up tax reform in 2013. I want to be an active participant in that process.
Whether voters believe what you just told me or not, believe you can do that, they certainly can't deny the passion in your voice and in your eyes as you say it.
Thank you.
You have said that you believe in this process, and we mentioned the fact this is an uphill climb.
Absolutely.
You are out there every day. You really believe you can beat her, don't you?
I really do, and I'll tell you why. When you look at the sort of races that we've seen statewide here in California for the last 20 years, we've had a lot of millionaires and billionaires and CEOs and movie stars, frankly, run as Republicans, and it hasn't been effective. I really believe whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or a declined estate, you're looking for someone who understands what your family is going through, someone who has the skills, the abilities, and the expertise and the background to work every day on their behalf, and who's committed to doing it. Dianne Feinstein is none of those things anymore. She has no idea what families in California are going through. We've had people in the Central Valley crying out for help with water resources for decades, and she's done nothing but talk about it. I have an active plan to bring water resources to California and plans to do so, and everything in my background says that I will, Ross.
All right, we have a lot more to talk about this Sunday morning. I think at this point, though, it is important to point out and to note that KUSI repeatedly asked Senator Feinstein to be with us on this program today. talk about her ideas and her record. She declined. When we return, however, we're going to talk, among other things, a little more about the recent deadly terrorist attack in Libya, the lack of security there, and the current senator's response to that crisis, among other things. San Diego people, we'll be right back.
Millionaire Congressman Bob Filner has one of the worst attendance records, but he did show up to vote himself pay raises. Now Filner wants to be mayor and hasn't done that work either. Experts call Filner's plans risky, have little credibility, and use upside-down logic. Instead of reforming pensions, his plan would borrow billions, putting San Diego back into debt. And Filner just says, I'm a congressman and can do whatever I want. Bob Filner, a bad investment for San Diego.
Well, we finally got Cox Whole Home DVR, which in our house, of course, means...
Whole home party! DVR in the kitchen, what?
That means we can record our shows and watch them in any room.
I'm recording 4 of my favorite shows and your mom's watching her cooking show all at the same time. Are you watching something you recorded?
I was about to.
Whole home party!
With Cox Whole Home DVR, watch what you want, where you want, starting at just $39.99 a month. Now with free Pro installation and free HBO and Stars. Switch to Cox today.
At Honda, we know you. We know you have to rise early and work late, with not enough sleep in between. How you sometimes need to get over to that exit like right now. And how things aren't just about you anymore. Introducing a car that starts with you. The all-new Honda Accord.
Character defines leadership. Bob Filner's character is combative. Filner verbally attacked an 11-year-old girl in a public forum. Filner's actions were called confrontational, divisive. Filner's relationship with Mayor Maureen O'Connor was called vindictive, destructive to this city. Most shockingly, Filner was arrested for assaulting a female baggage handler. The woman called him scary and hostile. Filner pleaded no contest. Bob Filner, combative, erratic, unfit for mayor.
Welcome back. The San Diego people, the 2012 general election, as I mentioned, just 16 days away. And today we're talking with Republican U.S. Senate candidate Elizabeth Emken. Now, one of the things you've already mentioned and touched on, but it's something we have been talking about in the media for the last month and a half now, and that is Benghazi and what happened there. The tragedy that took the ambassador and 3 men who have many, many strong ties right here to San Diego. The first reaction by the administration was, well, even they admit now it was questionable. They seem to be in disarray, and certainly there's a lot of information about Dianne Feinstein. She is on the Senate Intelligence Committee. And she came out and, you know, first she said it was a terrorist act, then she said it wasn't, then there was no info. It just seemed to be all over the board. It's a difficult time, though, when you're in a leadership position and something happens halfway around the world. Can you give her a pass on this? You know,
You were talking a little bit earlier about what do we lose here in California if we lose the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Let's be honest. The State Department, the CIA, they are handling our affairs, foreign affairs. I think Dianne Feinstein's role is minimal at best. I think we need to, California, take a look at what the condition of our state is, and I actually think it's a great argument for replacing her and putting in someone who has a healthcare background like myself. You know, we are looking at tremendous changes to our healthcare system if Obamacare stays intact. I oppose Obamacare and I want to see it repealed, but I do recognize that we need real healthcare reform in this country. And I believe that's, frankly, a bigger priority than having a senator who can't really keep her story straight.
So let me understand. You think that a person who represents California, at least right now in our history, should worry more about jobs, the economy, health care, those kind of things than what's going around the world?
Exactly. Well, first of all, Dianne Feinstein has failed to say anything about what she would do with another 6 years. So it's very difficult to know what her priorities would be. But what I can tell you is, to your point, in talking with Californians, they're concerned about jobs. They're concerned about the effect of this health care bill on their businesses and their personal health. And certainly, while, of course, matters of national security are important, again, I don't think we lose much if Dianne Feinstein is no longer at the head of that committee. Clearly, her contribution was limited on Libya. She was wrong about what happened, and she hasn't even been able to take down the wrong statement off her website. So I don't really think that this is something that she's paying very close attention to.
2 years ago, a lot of freshman members of Congress went there because of the Tea Party and the influence of the Tea Party. And I guess the jury is out whether they did a good job or a bad job. They certainly changed Washington when they walked into Congress, particularly Congress, obviously the House of Representatives. At the same time, they also had to yell very loudly to get heard.
Yeah.
And are you ready to yell?
You know, it's a little different. It's going to be different on the Senate side. You know, one of the things that I'm well prepared for, I believe, is I understand and am going to be able to, from day one, take advantage, frankly, of the tremendous ability of a single senator to create much change.
You have a lot more power, don't you?
You really do. And I don't think everyone who goes back there understands exactly what that means. I believe I do, and I'm going to take advantage of it from day one on behalf of not just Californians, but everyone in this country. I think I have a very unique perspective, Ross. When I say I'm going to go back there and look at every element of our federal budget, first of all, bring about a budget. Dianne Feinstein hasn't done that in 4 years. We have to. We have to look at domestic discretionary spending alone. Reductions there will not bring our debt under control. I mentioned I have had 2 careers, and my son just had his 20th birthday, and he's profoundly disabled. He'll need a lifetime of care. When I say that I'm going to go back and look at all of our budget, including the entitlement programs, make the changes that need to be made so that those programs are there for those who are truly mentally or physically unable to care for themselves, I think I have something to offer not only to California, but the country, and I intend to be that strong voice at the table for the disabled. And when we go through tax reform.
Here's a strange question. Do Republicans need reform too? Do you need to take some Republicans by the shoulder and shake them and say, hey, wake up. I went around the state of California and you're not listening.
Oh, exactly right. Well, again, look, I'm a lifelong Republican, but clearly I'm running my own campaign. And running up and down the state, a grassroots campaign, if you will. And so clearly I am out there listening to and responding to what the people are thinking and what they are concerned with. And I will go back there and be I think a strong voice at the table, but clearly everything in my background has been, I've shown the ability to consensus build and to reach agreements. Both bills that I did had bipartisan support, and I think there's an appropriate way to move those issues forward too.
One other issue I do want to touch on briefly, and that is military spending, because in San Diego that is a huge part of our economy here. And of course we're facing this cliff, the sequestration issue coming up. But there's always the issue, do we spend as much as we are now on defense and cut other things? Do we cut defense too? What do you think?
I don't think we should take anything off the table from examination. Here's what I mean by that. While clearly I am in favor of a strong defense and would not support reducing defense spending that directly affects our servicemen and women, I think every agency, every business unit, if you will, has opportunities to be more efficient. So I would not want to take for example, what we have here domestically in support of our military, whether it's a data center or whether it's some other sort of administrative function. I think every agency has the ability to save money and to be more efficient. You just need somebody like me who's used to dealing with really big numbers at IBM.
To ride it from the top down, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, I want to make sure we get this in. We have made an effort. KUSI has made repeated requests to have Senator Feinstein join us, and she chose not to do this. I know you've been bringing up in your campaign over and over again that she has chosen not to debate you either. But that certainly is consistent with her approach to the campaign. We want you to take a look and watch this.
I had a sit-down interview with Senator Dianne Feinstein today. As you know, she's running for re-election this year. And when I was at Tampa at the Republican convention, I spoke with her challenger about Senator Feinstein's refusal to debate. You're going to hear from both of them, starting with the Republican challenger, Elizabeth Emken.
You know, I'll give you a quote from the LA Times. The LA Times said, "Nothing says entrenched incumbent like a 42-year politician who won't debate their challenger."
I got to ask you about Elizabeth Emken. She wants to debate you. The LA Times came out and said you ought to debate her.
I'm running my own campaign. Thank you, Mark.
Is there any more you can add to that?
Did a large event in Modesto, did 3 or 4 meetings, been in Southern California, and that's what I'll continue to do.
Wouldn't it be better for the voters to hear both sides?
No, thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was the end of the interview.
Yeah.
Now, in her limited defense, she is the incumbent. At that moment, she certainly had a large lead in the polls. From a political strategy point of view, she doesn't have to sit down and talk with you. But why should she?
Well, first of all, it's disingenuous to the voters, and second of all, I have all kinds of reasons. First of all, she does not hold a strong lead. We have she's at 48%, with 21% of Californians undecided. That means Californians are looking for an alternative to Dianne Feinstein.
That's your number that you're targeting.
That's exactly right. You're right. It is good political strategy for her to avoid a conversation, but it's disingenuous. It's not democratic, and I believe the voters should reject it wholesale. You know, look, Orrin Hatch, he lives in a red state. He's debating. He's been around as long as she has. There's a debate in New York, a heavily blue state, wider margin. They're debating. It should be a disqualifier, Ross.
Well, it's not going to happen here if history, certainly history of this campaign, is
Right.
just not going to happen. But
Yeah.
we only have a few more days left before the election. All right, still ahead here in San Diego, people. We have a lot more to talk about. And one of those issues is the #1 issue most voters this election year, and that is the economy. Jobs, the nation's $16 trillion debt. We touched on it a little. Let's talk about it some more with Elizabeth Emken. That's next, right here on San Diego People.
Remember those old westerns where a traveling salesman sells a magic elixir that he promises will fix whatever ails you? Well, there's one in San Diego, Carl DeMaio. He's selling a potion called a roadmap to recovery so he can become mayor, but he's just a snake oil salesman. DeMaio says he'll cut taxes, but he's voted for tax increases for his friends. DeMaio wants to cut government, but spends more on his council office than anyone. In the old west, they ran him out of town. Here, we just vote no on DeMaio.
There's a Mossy Nissan for everyone, and these days, everyone needs great gas mileage and lower prices. So, come get 38 for $99 at Mossy Nissan today. That's our 38 MPG Nissan Altima, rock bottom priced at only $99 a month lease. This isn't a stripped-down Econo car. It's Mossy Nissan's totally redesigned, high-tech Altima 2.5S with 38 MPG for only $99 a month. Come to Mossy Nissan, where you always drive better for less.
Scott Peters helped cause a national scandal by deliberately underfunding our pension system. And even after he got caught, he tried it again at the Port Commission. He didn't learn his lesson. Unbelievable and wrong. Do you really, really want Scott Peters voting on your Social Security and Medicare in Washington? Think about that. The National Republican Congressional Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
People say I catch everything. It's true, because I have Time Warner Cable video and internet. I can watch thousands of on-demand movies and all my favorite shows anytime, anywhere. On my smartphone, on my tablet, super fast on my laptop, and my 60-inch LCD. Uh-oh.
Whatever you're passionate about, Time Warner Cable invents better ways to love it even more. Time Warner Cable. Enjoy better.
Back again now with U.S. Senate candidate Elizabeth Emken. Thanks for being with us and talking about this. This is so important to so many people. Money, the economy, that's the #1 issue. Everybody says that.
Yeah.
But then we have to look at how we pay for this. It's like a household where you look at it and say, yeah, I'd love a new car, I'd love this, but how are we going to pay for it? Do you think the Bush tax cuts should be renewed? Should taxes go up for the rich? Should the middle class be left alone? I leave it in your lap.
Yeah. Well, I do believe there'll be federal tax reform next year, and I believe we have to do something. Again, we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. I don't believe any corporation or individual should pay more than 25% tax. I actually have a detailed tax reform plan on my website at emken2012.com. Matter of fact, I have many position papers there on water, on energy, on our debt, on health care. But in terms of tax reform, in addition to no one paying more than 25%, no one should be paying zero either, whether it's a corporation or an individual. So I do support closing of loopholes and special tax treatments that have created that environment. I propose a flatter, simpler tax code. But there are some provisions that I feel very strongly should be part of our federal tax code. I believe in the charitable deduction. I think that the federal government doesn't do a good job of working in that arena. I'd like to see more and more of what we used to see, charitable work done.
Home mortgage allowance, that's another big one.
I believe we should keep that. I don't support removing the home mortgage deduction. Those are two areas that I would like to see continue.
Do you support closing loopholes for corporations? Because
Yes.
that seems to be a real bugaboo for a lot of people.
You know, I do. I think that we need to look at what some of these special tax treatments we've been giving corporations for years and really ask, are they necessary?
Now, the
and
other
are they
side says
appropriate?
that helps create jobs, but the corporations should pay their fair share, right?
Yeah, well, you know, look, whenever the federal government decides to get involved and make things better, you know, I can give you some examples. In health insurance, for example, 30 years ago, the federal government got involved in it and started giving special tax treatments for large companies for health insurance, but left out small businesses and individual plans.
Right.
This is why we have the healthcare crisis that we're having right now in this country, in my view.
There's one other issue that is affecting all of us right now, and that is gasoline prices,
Oh, my goodness.
particularly in this state. I mean, every
Yes.
time we pull up, they're starting to come down just a
Right.
little bit, but they're still up around $4.50,
Right.
$4.60 a gallon.
Right.
Dianne Feinstein has called for an investigation. She wants to know what's behind it all. Do we need an investigation?
word.
Do we need changes? What do we need to get gas prices?
She can save us all a lot of time and go pull out one of her last investigations that I don't know that we ever saw any results from. Dianne finds that none of us need an investigation to know why we have high gas prices in California. When we have our own unique blend, we set ourselves up for failure. Look, 11 years ago, Dianne Feinstein said there was no point in drilling in Anwar and bringing oil to here domestically because it would take 10 years to get that oil to market.
Right.
That's the sort of forward thinking that the senator utilizes. So
Okay.
I think clearly Senator Feinstein has no plan for our energy future.
All right, so you're in the last, we've got about a minute left of our program today. This is the last leg of the campaign. You are going to be probably on the road virtually every day between now and November 6th. Can you make up the difference?
Absolutely. When you have someone like Feinstein at 48% with 21% undecided, people are looking for an alternative. If they were going to go with her, they would be doing it already. My challenge is to get my name and get my message out there. And look, the last time Senator Feinstein ran in 2006, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, cable news was just getting started. If Sandra Fluke can go from being a complete unknown to a household name in 24 hours, I'm quite certain that when that fickle media spotlight makes it over to the California U.S. Senate race, that the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate will get the attention, and that those looking for an alternative will find it in me.
We'll see what happens on election night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
I appreciate it very much.
Listen,
Thank you.
one last note. Again, if Senator Dianne Feinstein decides she wants a similar opportunity to appear here on KUSI, we will gladly provide it. Thank you for joining us for San Diego People. Be sure to watch our expanded election coverage on November 6th, beginning at 6 and lasting throughout the evening. I'm Ross Becker.